Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 450, an intro to Prejudice, the final phase of the conquest for the human heart. The podcast objectives are discuss the significance of your victory over contempt, analyze how the degrees of holiness defeat the degrees of lawlessness, and reveal the sinister objective of prejudice. Take some more time to celebrate. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 288 of our exposition of lawlessness. Before I begin today's lesson, I would like to announce another major milestone in this podcast ministry. By the grace and favor of Elohim, today we are posting our 300th podcast over the past 3 years. This may or may not seem like a major feat or milestone to some, but I would have you know that this podcast is only one facet of our ministry. And thus, it is no small feat, and it is nothing that I could have done on my own. Therefore, having obtained help from Elohim, I continue unto this day, and I am very happy for those of you who are continuing with us. And I look forward to highlighting our next major milestone after we create podcast number 400. Now, back to our program and the more critical matter at hand. In the most recent podcast, we concluded our series on virtue and contempt by analyzing the topography of the former and how you can succeed the valley of decisions. That said, if you've been following the lessons, completing the assignments, and walking in the 7 pillars of our faith, then you, my friend, have unlocked the power of virtue, and you have taken the first step in establishing your reign over contempt. And so it's time for another celebration. To wit, we must celebrate your victory over every degree of contempt. In achieving this glorious victory, you have eliminated 12 of the 80 degrees of lawlessness, and not just any 12. You, my friend, have defeated and eliminated 12 prominent strongholds, and 4 of these were in your heart. In doing so, you have completed the first half of the work required to regulate your heart, such that it is always fixed to do the Father's will. Not only this, but you have torn down the wall of partition that had separated you from experiencing the full breadth of the Father's goodwill. And with great conviction, you can declare, nothing will separate me from the Father and his love. Congratulations. Take a bow. And yet, I admonish you, in the spirit of the watchman, don't let down your guard for 1 minute, not one single minute. You have done well, but virtue is only the second of 9 grades of holiness. And so your work is still not done. As I have said before, and often, many difficult days are coming, and every enemy you have ever known will soon be on the rise. Now, you can see this by observing the image to the left. Vis-a-vis, you've knocked off despair, that crook, and you've knocked off noncompliance, and most recently, you've knocked off dishonesty. And yet, these are only three of the fundamental degrees of lawlessness. And so, you must knock off 17 more. Likewise, you have knocked off distrust, nonconformance, and unrighteousness, three of the 20 focal degrees of lawlessness. And yet, there are 17 more villains and thieves just like them, and they are all waiting for their turn to make a go at you. Then again, you have knocked off self reliance, complacency, and defilement, three of the 20 critical degrees of lawlessness. And yet, there are 17 more like them, all of whom pose their own unique threats, and all of which represent the ultimate test. Last but not least, you have knocked off doubt, disobedience, and contempt, three of the 20 primary degrees of lawlessness. And yet, there are 17 more spiritual diseases just like them, and they are all inflicting your being to some degree. Now, I said all that to remind you that the race is not given to the swift, and the battle is not given to the strong. Brothers and sisters, the only victory we will ever have will come if and only if we endure until the end. So take some time to celebrate and give thanks to the Most High Elohim for giving you these victories. But remember, the fight is still on. Your war with lawlessness is not over. The work before us is not yet done. It takes 2 degrees. Now, in initiating this podcast and this new series in our exposition of lawlessness, I want to briefly review what we learned in the final lessons on contempt. To it, we analyze the path you must follow to reign over contempt. Per the table below, we analyze how virtue is a maze-like valley that can only be succeeded by those who have unlocked the spiritual clutch gene and can make good decisions in every situation. Likewise, we came to see how fiery preaching is the key to mastering virtue, for it affects our hearts more than any other spiritual discourse, for it purges our hearts of every matter contrary to the Father's will. We also analyze the breastplate of righteousness, which is designed to guard our hearts in spiritual warfare and to insulate us from the issues and the cares of this life. And if you would like a similar recap of faith and obedience, I direct you to the table below. Now, the thing I would have you remember is sure, obedience and faith are designed to protect our minds, and virtue is designed to protect our hearts. And yet, virtue does not complete her great work alone. Quite the contrary. The same way, obedience and faith work together to guard your mind. Virtue works with the fear of Elohim to guard your heart. You can see this by observing the image to the left. To wit, the same way, faith and obedience are complementary degrees of holiness. Virtue and the fear of Elohim are structured in the same manner. As you would expect, the same rule is applied to knowledge and wisdom, temperance and endurance, patience and joy, and so on and so forth. Along these lines, it takes 2 degrees of holiness to defeat their corresponding degrees of lawlessness. To it, it takes 1 degree of holiness to defeat the enemy nation, and it takes another degree of holiness to defeat the invading army. And as contempt was the invading army defeated by virtue, we must now address the enemy nation. Per the image to the right, you can clearly see how contempt is an extension of prejudice. Ergo, the next degree of lawlessness we must address in our pursuit of the seal of Elohim is prejudice. Let's get started. The deadly course of self-rule. Now, it goes without saying that prejudice is indeed a sore evil, and yet we often fail to consider why. To wit, beyond all the terrible acts committed by those who have been infected with this spiritual disease, we must appreciate the following inflection point. Consider this, my friends. Prejudice is the deadliest spiritual heart disease of all time. This should be clear, first and foremost, due to everything we have learned about contempt. Remember, contempt is a feeling of disdain towards an authority figure which causes you to resist their desires and or commands. My dear friends, you must believe me, the worst place you could ever find yourself and the worst thing you could ever do is be in contempt of the Father's will. Trust me, it's just a matter of time. Yahuwah will handle his business, and it will be curtains for you. For look, listen, it has been written, it is a fearsome thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim. For we know him who has said, vengeance is mine, I shall repay. And again, Yahuwah shall judge his people. Brothers and sisters, we do know him, and he is not one to be messed with. He is no one you should resist. And yet, this is exactly what you are doing every time you operate in the spirit of contempt. Now, here lies the inflection. Vis-a-vis, contempt is the invading army of prejudice. To wit, it is the spirit of prejudice who unleashed the spirit of contempt to corrupt your heart. Here is why. The spirit of prejudice is designed to ensure your heart and your mind are under self-rule. And this is why the spirit of prejudice has enlisted the spirit of contempt as its invading army. It's because he must cause you to resist the desires of Elohim. If you do, Yahuwah will take his Holy Spirit away from you. And that is the moment the spirit of prejudice will enact the deadly course of self-rule. Now, I said all of that to establish an accurate baseline for our analyses on prejudice. Along these lines, you must appreciate how prejudice is a much more complicated matter than the rantings of uneducated bigots and the ignorance of petty fools. My dear friends, you must believe me. These are merely surface wounds. Trust me, the bigger issue is what is driving this decrepit model of self-injury. To wit, what is beneath the surface and how do we defeat it? Brothers and sisters, this is a question we all must ask ourselves. Believe me, we all have been infected by the spirit of prejudice to some degree. That's not in question, and that's not the real issue. Trust me, the real issue is we have not completed our conquest of our hearts. Yes, we've done away with contempt, but we have not addressed the spirit of prejudice that was pushing us to walk in the ways of contempt. And seeing as prejudice is a much bigger issue than most realize due to the idiocy of a dummy nation that is scripturally denoted by confusion. You must reset your understanding, else you may escape the offshoots of racism and other derivatives of this foul spirit. But you will still have prejudice within your heart, and your heart will never be free. Alas, you, my friend, will fall back into a spirit of contempt and initiate a dangerous slide designed to undo your victories over disobedience and doubt. Therefore, I admonish you to take my advice and hear what the Ruach has to say about the spirit of prejudice. You'll be glad if you do. For although prejudice incites you to tear down others, the only one you are tearing down is you. Now, here is the final word. Prejudice plays a devastating part in defiling you and corrupting your heart. My dear friends, it goes without saying that a sane man would never make a case for prejudice. And yet, many sane men are harboring prejudice within their hearts. Why? No doubt, there are many reasons why many of us are not as vigilant about eliminating prejudice from our hearts as we are with some of the other spiritual diseases and viruses representing lawlessness. And yet, the primary reason why honest men and women are in this state is quite simply because they don't know it's there. Alas, they have prejudice within their hearts and they don't know it's there. This is why I told you in the beginning of our series on contempt, it's a long way down until we get to the bottom of what is truly in your heart. And the truth, my friend, is that we're only halfway there. To wit, we still have a long way to go before we eliminate every factor of lawlessness from our hearts. Heretofore, I recommend get your shovel back out, for we still have much work to do. For lo, if you don't conquer the prejudice within your heart, that prejudice will conquer you. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on the word you have heard today. And as always, ask the Father to reveal the truth to you. For the children of Elohim live by conviction. And if he has not convicted you, or if you had not heard him concerning these matters, you should pray until you do. Today, I want you to meditate on the word I have shared. And I want you to prepare your mind and heart to receive what the Ruach has for you in this upcoming series on prejudice and the fear of Elohim. In the spirit of honesty, I ask you to set the table by asking the Ruach to reveal to you if you have any prejudice in your heart. And don't assume either way. Rather, listen to what the Ruach has to say. Trust me, all of us think we are better than what we really are. So let me tell you what I tell myself almost every day. It doesn't matter what you think. All that matters is what Yahuwah is declaring. He is the judge. Therefore, the only sane thing you can do is to examine your heart based upon the spiritual guidelines he has revealed to you. This is the way, my friends, and we will continue to follow it with the next podcast. I'll see you in 2 days. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 450, an intro to Prejudice. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 451, The Spiritual Disease of Prejudice, Part 1. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim, continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.